Welcome to Battlefront Stories. Here we bring forgotten battles, real soldier diaries, and untold stories of war back to life. Witness history, one front line at a time. Harry S. Truman, 1884 to 1972, was a statesman who served as the 33rd President of the United States from 1945 to 1953. Rising to the presidency from the vice presidency upon the death of Franklin D. Roosevelt, Truman was the last U.S. president without a college degree. Although initially rejected by the military academy due to poor eyesight, he memorized the eye chart to enlist and demonstrated exceptional leadership as an artillery captain in France during World War I. His presidency coincided with one of the most critical turning points in world history. Truman ordered the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end World War II, and subsequently adopted the containment policy against Soviet expansionism. In line with this, he implemented the Marshall Plan to halt Europe's economic collapse, introduced the Truman Doctrine to counter the threat of communism, and spearheaded the establishment of NATO. Furthermore, in 1948, he became one of the first world leaders to recognize the State of Israel, and in 1950, he deployed U.S. troops to the Korean War. In domestic policy, he took courageous steps regarding civil rights, signing executive orders that banned racial segregation in the U.S. military. His surprise victory over Thomas E. Dewey in the 1948 election, despite unanimous predictions of defeat by polls and the media, is considered one of the most iconic moments in U.S. political history. Although his popularity declined toward the end of his term, due to corruption allegations involving some members of his administration, he is today ranked among the top U.S. presidents by historians and scholars for his decisive foreign policy and successful crisis management. Truman was informed of the Manhattan Project shortly after Roosevelt's death and received news of the first successful atomic bomb tests in July 1945 while attending the Potsdam Conference. Faced with Japan's refusal to surrender and military estimates suggesting that a land invasion could result in 500,000 to 4 million American casualties and millions of Japanese deaths, Truman approved the use of the atomic bomb to end the war quickly and save lives. Japan surrendered in August 1945 following the attacks. As the U.S. economy struggled to transition to peacetime, labor unions launched massive strikes due to rising inflation and the removal of price controls. Truman's aggressive stance during the 1946 National Rail Strike, where he threatened to draft strikers into the Army, caused his approval rating to plummet to 32%, leading to the Republicans gaining control of Congress in the 1946 midterms. In foreign policy, Truman took a hard line against Soviet expansion in Eastern Europe, launching the Truman Doctrine to aid Greece and Turkey, and the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe. During this period, the National Security Act of 1947 established the Department of Defense, the CIA, and the National Security Council, NSC. He also successfully executed the Berlin airlift in 1948 against the Soviet blockade. However, he faced criticism from conservatives for losing China after the Communists won the Chinese Civil War in 1949. During the same era, despite warnings from Secretary of State George Marshall regarding Arab relations and oil resources, Truman supported the Jewish state for humanitarian reasons and became the first leader to officially recognize Israel on May 14, 1948. Domestically, he proposed the Fair Deal Program, advocating for national health insurance and labor rights, though most of these reforms were blocked by a conservative coalition in Congress. Nevertheless, he took historic steps for civil rights by becoming the first president to address the NAACP and initiating the desegregation of the federal government and the military. Heading into the 1948 election with a 36% approval rating and a party split into three factions, Truman conducted a relentless campaign against the Do-Nothing Congress, traveling 35,000 kilometers by train. Defying the polls and newspapers that had already declared Thomas Dewey the winner, he secured a stunning victory with the support of farmers, laborers, and Midwesterners. That same year, he issued two revolutionary executive orders, 9,980 and 9,981, banning racial discrimination in federal agencies and the armed forces, and in 1949, he appointed William H. Hastie as the first black federal judge. Following the Soviet Union's first atomic test in 1949, Truman ordered the development of the hydrogen bomb to maintain nuclear superiority, escalating the Cold War arms race with the first test in 1952. When North Korea invaded South Korea in 1950, Truman deployed U.S. troops under United Nations auspices. During the conflict, he dismissed General Douglas MacArthur in 1951 for defying civilian authority and advocating for the use of atomic weapons against China. This decision triggered a massive public backlash, dropping Truman's popularity to a historic low of 22% as the war turned into an exhausting stalemate until the 1953 armistice. By establishing NATO and approving the secret NSC-68 strategy, which tripled the defense budget, Truman laid the foundation for the militarized containment policy of the Cold War. Truman's second term was also marked by domestic turmoil, including an assassination attempt by Puerto Rican nationalists at Blair House in 1950, and a 1952 steel strike where his attempt to seize mills was ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. Beset by low approval ratings, corruption scandals, and age, Truman decided not to seek re-election in 1952. His hand-picked Democratic successor, Adlai Stevenson, suffered a heavy defeat against Republican Dwight D. Eisenhower, ending 20 years of Democratic rule and severing the old friendship between Truman and Eisenhower. After leaving the White House, Truman returned to his home in Independence, Missouri. While a myth persisted for years that he lived in financial hardship, documents released in 2009 revealed he had actually saved nearly $1 million from his salary. However, his lobbying regarding his difficult straits was instrumental in the passage of the 1958 Former Presidents Act, which granted pensions to former presidents. In retirement, he established his own presidential library and taught history. His dream of national health insurance was honored in 1965 when President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Medicare Act at the Truman Library, presenting the first two cards to Harry and Bess Truman. Despite his earlier civil rights record, Truman criticized some 1960s civil rights protests as Soviet plots and expressed concern that the CIA had veered into cloak and dagger operations. Harry S. Truman died on December 26, 1972, at the age of 88 and was buried in the courtyard of his library. This is just one side of the war. For more, check out Battlefront Stories and make sure to like the video and subscribe for upcoming episodes.